Hey, welcome. It's really great to see you here at Big Questions. Thanks so much for coming. My name is V. Do keep coming in and grab a seat. So Big Questions is a chance to ask, discuss and investigate some of those big questions about life, its meaning and the claims of Jesus. So this week we're looking at the issue of stress and the perspective that Jesus offers. In a moment we'll be hearing a short talk, and then after that we'll have some time for questions. Please text in your questions to the number that you'll see here on the lectern in front of me and on the pillars down the side. We'd really love to hear your questions, so get texting them in during the talk and after. And we're really delighted to have Dave Gobbett here as our speaker. Dave studied engineering at Keys, and he now works at a church in Cardiff. So please welcome Dave to the front.
Thanks, V. It's great to be here. Nice to be back in Cambridge. And I thought Wales was supposed to be the wet place, but I came over into Cambridge. It was pouring with rain, freezing. I was like, get me back to Cardiff. And it's great to be here. It's a drug for 17 days. It's a drug for the week here and there. But for the amount of buzzes that you get out of it, I know they never last. The few times I've won the title, while I was doing it, it was great. The people, the adulation, all that was fantastic. But 2 hours later, I sat down and said, well, is that it? Fantastic buzz, but there's been too high a price to pay this season. I wouldn't wish it on my own worst enemy. I'll probably end up killing myself. So Ronnie O'Sullivan reflected a recent snooker world championship. Some people seem to be so laid back in life, they're almost perpetually on a sun lounger. Everything is taken in their stride, never seem fazed. Other people are the opposite, completely the opposite. Work builds up, exams come at us. The pressure is mounting. Relationships break down. The pain is overwhelming. I don't know what kind of person you are, but the fact that you've come to a title, exam term stress, is it inevitable? Whether you see the light at the end of a tunnel as the sunlight in the daytime or the approaching train crashing towards you, the fact is, we all face stress at times, don't we? What we're going to do for the next 20 minutes or so is I'm going to deal with this question on exam term stress, is it inevitable, by thinking about 4 issues to do with stress. The reality of stress, the roots of stress, the problem of stress, and then the answer to stress. And then we're going to hand over to you for your questions. So here's our first point, the reality of stress. I want to begin by simply acknowledging that stress is real. It's real, it's at large. And we all feel the pressure of stress. The pressure to perform with every birthday, expectations from our culture, expectations from back home, from our friends, maybe even expectations from ourselves. And I think that the pressure points are particularly in the area of our work and in our relationships. Let's just kind of work through that briefly. Think about the area of work, stress in work. The Independent's Polly Toynbee recently wrote an article, Whatever Happened to 9 to 5? And she quotes a banker by the name of Jack Algazi, a lawyer, and he says, quotes, I'm an insomniac, so I might wake at 4 a.m. and do some work. I'll get into chambers by 7:30. If I've got a big case, I might have to stay here and work late into the night. Otherwise, I might get home about 7. The baby's always asleep. I don't get to bed until about 1 or 2. You can never do enough work on a case, and you're only as good as the last case they saw you in. The one thing harder than climbing to the top of the tree is staying at the top of the tree. Tom York from Radiohead was once asked about his ambitions. He replied, ambitious for what? For what? I thought when I got to be where I was, everything would be different. I'd be somewhere else. I thought it would be all white, fluffy clouds. And I got there, I fulfilled my ambitions, and I'm still here, and there's nothing here. And many would echo his experience, that kind of hamster in running wheel syndrome. You aim for the stars, you climb the ladder, you look up in celebration, the stars are still there, but I'm not, and I'm motivated, I achieve. There's euphoria and then disillusionment. We kind of cycle around. Motivation, achievement, euphoria, disillusionment. You'll go round and round. You're desperately looking forward to May week, but it's going to disillusion you. It's not going to be as good as you hoped. The work cycle goes round and round. I wonder where the pressure points are for you. Sure, there are going to be exams in the next few weeks for the non-engineers. Engineers get out of the way early on, don't we? But there's deadlines coming, dissertations. Maybe thinking about a summer job, perhaps, we're trying to work for. A friend of mine who was a medic when I was here in Cambridge, he was constantly living his life in fear. The failure and the shame of being found out, that he didn't belong here. Stress in work, stress in relationships. It was a beautiful starry night, the perfect end to the perfect evening. James was driving Ellie home after the summer ball. Their route took them past a well-known parking spot. James turns to Ellie and says, hopefully, do you want to get in the back? No, I want to stay in the front with you, she replies. The moral of the story, it's very easy to misread our signals and miscommunicate. And the pressure in relationships to get things right, actually, they often go wrong. And many of us have been badly hurt in relationships. I think of ways in which I hurt and was hurt during my relationships as a student. We can have that kind of paper cup syndrome of being picked up, used up, screwed up, and thrown away. And as I was preparing for this presentation, I thought I'd have a look at what our culture is saying about relationships and whether they contribute to our sense of being stressed. So, replete with my brown paper bag, and I went into a newsagent to pick up an edition of Cosmo. Now, I wouldn't recommend many of you get your Cosmopolitan magazine, but here I read of something called Desperate and Dateless, the world's biggest blind date party, organised in February a few years ago. Nearly 2,000 tickets were bought for the event, and the heat was on to pull before the night was out, if not with your allocated date. Apparently self-confessed desperados dreamt of romance. Everyone was longing not to go home empty-handed, and those who were slow off the mark, there were these giant mobile phones on the other side of the stage with text messages coming in, trying to meet people up, and the way of kind of finding a new person. Quotes, perfect for secretly ditching the date and trying someone new, writes Emma Creamer. Later on in the magazine, I read of a single banker by the name of Ben Michael, aged 26, self-confessed serial adulterer. He admits, and I quote, I've cheated in all 4 of my relationships, and I love it. It's the best sex I get, illicit affair sex. I satisfy myself sexually, and then I leave. 9 times out of 10, I call my girlfriend straight afterwards because I feel so guilty. It's rare a man would leave his girlfriend for the other woman. I've never been prepared to. For all I know, they could be seeing other people too. We're told that singleness is loneliness, that betrayal is sexy, and is there any wonder that when we think about relationships, very often we get very stressed? I wonder where the pressure points are for you in terms of relationships. Are you struggling to keep a long-term relationship going, a long-distance one going? Maybe you struggle to come to terms with the fact that everyone else in your year group is coupling up and you're the one who hasn't done that yet. Maybe you're finding it hard to read a friendship you've got with someone, and you're kind of reading into the text message exchange, going back and forth. You never can kind of get to the bottom of it, and it's stressing you out. Stress in relationships, stress in work, stress is a reality. The reality of stress, first point. Second point, the roots of stress. How do we navigate this crazy, stressful world that we live in? I want to propose that most of the stress that we experience in life can be resolved into 2 roots, one of 2 roots. They go very, very deep down, very, very hard to shift. First root, we try to define our identity, which makes us stressed. Second route, we try to secure our future, makes us stressed. Let's just kind of drill into those 2 roots of stress. Firstly, we try to define our identity. We're a very, very competitive culture, aren't we? Extremely competitive, and no more so than here in Cambridge. Survival of the fittest, this homogenisation of the 21st century, means there's a strange, weird pressure on all of us to define who we are. And it's a pressure both to fit in and to stand out all at the same time. It's a bit weird, isn't it? I'm told I need to fit in with the crowd. I don't need to look or act too strange in order to be accepted by the group. I've got to fit in. But then I'm also told to stand out. I need to kind of be impressive and a performer. I need to make my mark, have my niche in the market of friendship. There's pressure to define our identity in our work. We stress over getting the highest degree possible so that we will be more loved by mum or dad. We stress over getting the largest starting bonus that we can in order to be respected by contemporaries or have that kind of live in luxury you want. Stress in our work to define our identity, same in our relationships, to define our identity. I stress desperately over whether or not the girl down the corridor really does like me like I wish she did. We stress over whether he will still be interested in me when he graduates and goes down to London. I'm left here for another year in Cambridge. And the Cosmo world just ups the ante for us, telling me that unless I am beautiful, unless I'm a smart city worker, unless I'm interested in buying the right magazine, then I may as well not bother. Much of the stress we feel is because we're trying to define our identity. I need to make myself someone. In my work, in my relationships. First route. Second route, we try to secure our future. And I think that causes stress. Again, this symptom of the culture we're in, very uncertain place, uncertain times we live in, we desperately want to secure a future, guarantee it. Let's think about our work. We burn the candle, both ends, even in the middle, frantically cramming our microeconomics or our contract law exam revision to secure the top law job after when we graduate. If we're lucky, we get the job and we make it. Or we get onto the ladder, we climb up the ladder as fast as we can and we can achieve that basic human need of an IKEA or Habitat-clad flat in Clapham or Islington where we kind of live out our dreams. Come on, please. And everything's at stake because the expectations from our mum and dad or our friends or our family or the personal ambition makes it so volatile, where it seems like the bottom 8 rungs of the job ladder have been so greased that no future is secure, so we get so stressed about it. So stressed. Maybe my questions don't come up. I've question spotted. I've banged that question came up. It didn't come up. Desperate to fix it. We try to fix it and secure our future with regards to our relationships. We stress over where our relationship is going, desperately worried that we won't get the future happiness we long for at the other end. Maybe we stress about the future and we think, will there ever be someone the other end? Will I just forever be waiting and waiting and waiting? Here's Dr. Sidney Crown, the Cosmo relationship guru, quotes, "When you really feel your partner is with you for good, you can feel less motivation to look after yourself and look your best. This is natural, but can threaten the relationship if you really do stop looking after yourself." Well, thanks, Dr. Crown. Very wise advice there. So there are the 2 routes of stress I want to propose. We try to define our identity. We try to secure our future. Thirdly, the problem of stress. We've seen the reality, the roots, now the problem of stress. One way of defining stress might be overloading something, or to be precise, loading more weight on something than it was designed to bear. Take my 4-year-old Barney and his right radius, which is one of the bones in his forearm, along with your ulna. Now, for I don't know, many medics here in the room? Hands up if you're a medic. Okay, you can confirm this with me afterwards. Good for you for coming out for a lunch bar. Excellent, very busy, I know. Ulnar radius, they're the bones used to try to help you move and control your wrist and turn your hand around like this. They're not designed to bend 45 degrees backwards and then bear the weight of said Barney as he's climbing down the stairs, as it happened earlier in the year. And and he did it, and it snapped under the stress. Poor Barney. He was actually not being irresponsible like some of my kids. He was actually going to get something for his little brother, and he fell down the stairs while helping his little brother, which I think is like fallen hero moment for little Barney. But it snapped, and the same occurs to human beings. You load yourself with something that is more than you were designed to bear, then, well, you'll find yourself under stress pressure, and you may even snap under the stress. You weren't designed to bear the weight of defining your identity. That's too much for us. You weren't designed to bear the weight of securing the future. That's far too ahead for us. Little wonder, then, so many of us go through life stressed. We're overloading ourselves. We're kind of loading too much on ourselves. Stress, you see, is a symptom of a wider problem, which is in all of us and which the Bible calls sin. Sin is when we ignore God in the world that God has made. He's given us everything. In fact, we say, clear off, I don't want anything from you. We take everything we've got from him, but then we slam the door on him. We kick Jesus out of his throne of the world and we sit in it ourselves. It's rebellion against God. It's saying, no, clear off God. I want to live life on my own. I will be God. I will run my world my way. I will define my identity. I'll secure my future. But when we stop treating God as if he's God and we treat ourselves as if we're God, we're having to play the role of God in this world, and that will cripple you. Two things it will make happen. One, it will make life hard. It will make death worse. It will make life hard. The world was not meant to be as it is. It was made perfectly by God at the beginning of time. It's now been horribly spoiled by human beings. And the Bible actually says that work and relationships are much, much harder now that we've told God to clear off. And we're kind of building on ourselves the responsibility of work and relationships delivering for us and helping us to define ourselves and secure ourselves without any reference to the God who put us here, who cares for us and has provided for all we need. Little wonder we feel stressed. We bump God out of the picture, clear off stage God. I'm going to carry it all myself. And we just are burdened and crippled. Kicking God out, acting that way in his world makes life hard, it makes death worse. Because ignoring God in his world is okay, it's hard for the time being, but it's actually a really, really bad thing for the future. Because if you say to God, God, clear out of my world, and it's his world, then one day he says, okay, I will clear out and I'll leave you be. And the consequences of God saying, I'm moving away from you and you are on your own forevermore, for eternity, is for God to take away with him all the good, the joy, the work, the relationships, everything good in this world he takes away and leaves us in a horrible, horrible mess that the Bible actually refers to as the place called hell. It's a ghastly thought, but that's the consequence that Jesus would say for those who constantly pushed him away. He says, okay, yeah, fine, I'll go away and have it your way. That's the great, great problem of stress. We've seen the reality, we've seen the roots, we've seen the problem of stress. Finally, the answer to stress. Come on, Dave, give me something positive. If you've come out for lunch, let me give you a beginning of an answer, then we can go to some questions in a second. If stress is overloading something, putting on something or someone more than we were designed to bear, then surely the answer is not overloading something. Not putting on something more than they were designed to bear. That's the way Barney recovered as well as he did. He's now running up and down the stairs, whacking his brothers as he goes. And he was told by the doctor, no heavy lifting, no bending your radius 45 degrees, etc., etc. And he's got through it. And so for us, the answer to our stress is to realise we were not designed to define our identity or to secure our future with no reference to the God who made us and put us on the planet. Rather, we're to look to the one who was, who happily takes the responsibility of defining us and securing our future for us. Now, let me be crystal clear, because the obvious question is, well, surely Christians get stressed. I know many Christians who are stressed, and they do. And in the competitive world that we live in, there will always be pressure points and trials and headaches and heartaches. We're constantly under pressure. The kind of culture around us is telling us, define your identity, secure your future. But the key issue is how we deal with that. Will we do that on our own, in isolation, on our own? Or we say, God, you've placed me here. You please define my identity for me. This is too big for me. You please secure my future, please. The fact is, we've all kind of stuffed God out of the way. We want to live our lives on our own. And he says, you're going to be crippled if you do it that way. But look, here's my answer to you pushing me out and stepping in my shoes, is that I'm going to come into this world and step into your shoes. And that's what he does in Jesus Christ. Jesus comes into this stressful world of competition and uncertainty. He comes into the stressful world of confusion about identity in the future, into this world that's rejected him. And he gets unbelievable kind of pressure on him. His family hate him. His friends deny him, betray him. He gets crucified on a Roman cross. And why does he do it? Well, he does it because he says, look, I want to be broken under stress so that I can give you hope for all who are under stress yourselves. There's an amazing Bible verse that says, I think it's 2 Corinthians chapter 5, the Apostle Paul, St. Paul says this, God made him who had no sin, that's Jesus, to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. In other words, Jesus takes the stress, he cracks under the pressure that was put on him when he dies on the cross, so that he can give us strength and be made whole and be restored and renewed and be brought into relationship with God. There's so much more I'd love to talk with you about, but our time is almost done. The fact is that we've all turned our backs on God in a whole number of different ways. Very often, one of the first things that comes up because of that is that we get stressed. We're doing too much. We're ignoring God. And yet God says, look, I'm going to come into this world. I'm going to carry all the muck and mess you've done on myself. I'll take the blame. I'll be broken, says Jesus, to make you strong and give you a hope. One time when in the Gospels, Jesus saw people who are under great pressure. And Jesus said to them, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. It's a great promise. Every year, it's a particularly great time at this time of year, exam term. Will you look at Jesus and see in someone who will give us a hope and will secure our identity for us? I think our time's done, but we're going to have a little break now where we go into our tables and can have a chance to discuss anything that I've said. Why don't you think about the question, where do you turn when you're under stress? Where do you turn when you're under stress? And then there's some time for questions on the floor. Is that okay? Great.
Great. Sorry to break into your discussions, but do stay on afterwards and chat more. We're going to have some time for questions now. So, Dave, do you want to take the... Great. So, we're going to have a roving mic going round. So if you'd like to ask some questions from the floor to kick us off, then stick up a hand and we can bring that to you. If not, we can go straight to questions texted in. Okay, we can come back to roving mic. We'll go for texted in. So... what if God gives me an identity or future that I don't like? Isn't it better for me to decide?
If God gives me an identity or a future that I don't like, I should have clarified that. The promise is that Jesus Christ, he's someone who can define my identity. He's someone who is dearly loved, unconditionally loved by the one who knows the worst of us, but loves us anyway, and promises us a place of security and joy and forgiveness forevermore in heaven, okay? Now, the fact is that they are quite, in one respect, they're quite specific things in terms of an identity and a future, but there isn't the sense in which when Jesus defines my identity, he says, okay, you've now got to wear these kind of clothes, you've got to do this kind of degree, you've got to conform exactly in this kind of specific way. What I love about the Christian faith is that there are kind of expressions of Christianity in almost every culture around the world. So to say that you've got an identity that is kind of, let me be clear, it's not that your kind of identity has been squeezed on you like a mould on top of a bit of plasticine. You have your own gifts and talents and joys and privileges, etc. And Jesus says, look, don't you be worrying about trying to define yourself as someone who has to prove to other people that you're valuable. I tell you your value. I love you anyway. And to be loved by Jesus, to be loved by the most wonderful person you can possibly know. But you can still be you. So it's not that that suddenly changes. Likewise, the kind of future, the promise of an eternity of no more pain, no more joy, fulfillment, satisfaction, work that isn't tiring, etc., etc. I think these are things that we all naturally aspire to. Whenever you've done exams you've nailed, and you finish, you think, that was amazing, or you have a game of tennis or play your musical instrument, you think, that was brilliant, and then it disappears, the joy. Well, imagine that, but the joy carrying on forever. Well, that's what's on offer. I suppose you might not want that, but I think most of us would aspire to something that had a kind of permanence when so many times you think, that was great, but it just disappeared. So I think, let me be clear, it's not that you're going to be conformed or squeezed against your kind of will or your inner desires, but God is kind of renewing and refining you to be secure in those things. So,
great. Would anyone like to come back on that? Or ask another question from the floor if you'd like to pick up a hand? Okay.
Oh,
great. Do you want to just wait for the mic so everyone can hear? That'd be great. Be there in a moment. Just over here. Thank you.
So is stress or like pressure always bad? So sometimes stress means that we work more productively.
Yeah.
Stress might not be a function of me gauging my identity against it, but it might just be I have this to do in this amount of time, and I can't physically conceive how that's possible.
Yeah, I agree. So this is where we can kind of really choose our words really carefully. We talk about pressure or stress. We could, in some respects, the way I've been using the word stress is in primarily a negative way, as in the kind of the overpressure or the overload that is kind of crippling me and buckling me and snapping me potentially. But yeah, I personally work much better to deadlines than I do to kind of an open space. And so if I'm preparing something and I've got ages to go, I find it hard to kind of be motivated or to engage. But when I'm in the zone, off I go. And I quite like that buzz. Do I like the stress? Well, stress is the kind of the potential crime. This is overwhelming me. I'm crippled. So I suppose it's how we choose our words. So yeah, I definitely think that when we're under pressure, we can perform in ways, and those of you who are sportsmen or women here, totally, there's nothing like the kind of the buzz and the adrenaline of this is the game I've got to win. This is the one we've got to do. And you find yourself, the human spirit finds itself rising in that moment. But again, there's a difference between that and I'm overwhelmed, I'm buckled, there's stress, there's, even more, there's anxiety. Then we start getting into kind of medical issues of depression, which are kind of even more extreme, and the less extreme are kind of pressure and kind of working hard. And so it's a spectrum, isn't it? Really, I guess I was using stress as on the kind of the bad side of the line, but there's a good way in which we can be motivated. I agree on that.
Would anyone like to come back on that, or any other questions? Stick up a hand. Okay, so just because God offers us an identity, why does that make it true? Why should we actually believe it?
Well, that doesn't at all. Just because it's offered, or I'm claiming it's offered. In a sense, I had a very kind of bounded project in my 20 minutes just now. Why is it true? I'm making some big claims, and I guess, I don't know if you were here last week, Vaughan Roberts is a good friend, and he may well have spoken about the truthfulness of the accounts that are written in the New Testament. I think there's a ton of reasons to believe that, for example, what was written in there's a little blue books, by the way, on the tables. If you've not been to one of these before, or if you have and you've never taken one, have that, read it. It'll give you an eyewitness account on Jesus Christ, who's just the most amazing person you could get to know. Those books were written at the time that Jesus lived, and are eyewitness record of what he said and did. And we can be pretty sure that what we've got in our little books is what was written back at the time, and we can also be pretty sure that what was written back at the time is what took place back at the time. Now, that's another question, but in other words, this is like a kind of a reliable accounting of what took place. So then you've got to ask the question, well, does this make sense of the life that I'm living? Does this kind of ring true? So I'm hopefully trying to say today, the Christian claim is a good claim. The Christian claim about Jesus Christ offering hope in a stressy world is a good claim. But that's only half the story. You need to be persuaded both that it's good and something that you'd want to be true, and then you need to be persuaded that it is true. And one great philosopher in the past said, and that one of the great aims that Christians need to do is to explain the Christian message in such a way that people want it to be true and then show them that it is. And in a sense, I've done half of that, and I haven't had time to do the second half, but keep coming to these things for the second half.
Would anyone like to ask anything off that? Okay. So, a sec. So you talked about stress being a kind of a bad thing. Doesn't that kind of add extra stress if you feel bad that you shouldn't be feeling stressed?
Oh, yes. It's like, when people are being kind of proud, and someone's very humble, and I'm really glad I'm humble. Oh no, I'm being proud. No, I can't be proud. I'm being humble. You can't think about it without damaging the thing you're thinking about. Yes, and I know. Look, I'm a Cambridge grad, so I know that we can really overthink these things and think, oh no, don't get stressed. Don't get stressed. Be calm. No, I'm getting stressed, and then it kind of hypes and kind of reinforces the kind of craziness of it all. I think. What was the question again?
Is it possible to feel stressed about being stressed?
Yeah.
So feel bad that we shouldn't even be feeling stressed?
It is. I think at that point, that's another source of stress. I talked about work as being a source of stress and relationships being a source of stress. Well, stress is a source of stress. I think if you're, generally speaking, you're probably self-aware to know I'm really under pressure here and I need help at this point. I think there's all sorts of other things I could have said. Generally, often, when we're really under pressure, we kind of disappear off into our own little burrow and we kind of race from the library to our bedroom, to hall, to library, cycle around, and we kind of lose contact with people around us. I think very often people around us are a really great source of help in those places and can kind of calm it down a little bit. Don't take yourself too seriously. These exams will pass before you know it. Work will pass before you're done. But don't be too worried. If you are getting anxious or stressed, don't add insult to injury by stressing over the fact that you got stressed. I think the point at that place would be start trying to work out how you can find some kind of sanity and breathing space in the context. Again, we could have talked lots about working patterns and ensuring you have regular times off and getting out in the open air and eating healthily and exercising healthily and all those kind of good, just general wise counsel, which would all be part of the package as well. But don't overthink it.
Okay, and last question. So my Christian friends seem to get really stressed sometimes. How does that fit with what you've said about what Jesus offers? Yeah,
the Christians can get very stressed. In fact, Christians can get very everything. They can get very angry and very proud and very unkind. And it's not because they don't get very anything that they're Christians. It's not that they're a Christian because they don't get proud, or they're a Christian because they don't lust, or they're a Christian because they don't drink, or they don't get stressed. They're a Christian because they have seen in Jesus Christ the kind of the answer to their longings, the one who makes huge promises and substantiates those promises in his death and resurrection, ultimately forgiving us. And that's the reason they're a Christian, not because of anything on their side, but everything on God's side. And so when you see a Christian being just like your non-Christian friend, or just like you if you're not a Christian, the fact is that hopefully that shouldn't make you say, I can't believe that the Christianity is true because you're just like me. Well, we are. I am just like you. I'm looking to Jesus to try to forgive me for the times I've gone wrong. But it's precisely because I go wrong that I need to look to Jesus. So the difference between a Christian and a non-Christian is not good and bad, but we're all bad. We all get stressed, but it's someone getting some hope and some forgiveness would be what the Bible would say. And I generally think that so that would be my main answer, but the kind of follow-up to that would be, if someone truly grasped what the Christian message was all about in terms of Jesus defining my identity, I love you unconditionally, him guaranteeing a future that nothing can take away. If those two things were in the bag and I as a Christian really grasped that was true for me, then I genuinely would hope that there would be a bit more perspective when I went through the stressful times. And so it might be that there's a Christian who's really struggling, but it might be that at that point they've forgotten their Christian faith. And we forget our Christian faith all the time. But if we fully had grasped that I was loved regardless of how my exams went, and that God was never going to walk out on me regardless of how my performance in my grade 8 goes, if that was clear, that does liberate and does give us a sense of kind of perspective. And I can go for it now. And I can have the capacity to see a friend and have a conversation rather than just, sorry, can't talk, I've got to get back to the books, and that kind of mentality. So I would hope that the more we remember, if we're Christians, I guess there are a number of Christians here today, the more you remember the kind of things I've been saying, the more reserves I hope you might have when it comes to exam time. That, yes, work your socks off, but don't go overboard.
Thanks so much, Dave. That's all we've got time for. Can we give Dave a round of applause?
Thank you.
Brilliant. And if you don't need to rush off, you're really welcome to stay. There'll be some snacks coming around to you at your table so you can carry on those conversations from earlier. And Dave will also be around. He's really keen to chat if you'd like to discuss more about what's been said today. On your way out, you'll see a table with some books that will help you think more about this and other topics. And I think one of the best ways to investigate is to actually read one of the accounts of Jesus' life for yourself. So you'll see on your tables these little booklets. These are John's eyewitness account of Jesus' life. And at the back, there are kind of 6 sections, 6 pointers and questions that help you look at kind of key moments in his life. So get hold of one of them, read it by yourself, read it with a friend, and all the books at the back and these are free for you to take away. We'd love for you to make the most of them. So this is the last big questions this term, but at the end of term, so before May Week, we'll be hosting a garden party centred around the theme of celebration, so look out for that when it comes. Also on your tables you'll see some feedback cards. We'd love to know how you found the event, things you enjoyed, things you didn't enjoy, and if you'd like to chat more about anything you've heard today, just tick the box I'm interested and someone from the Christian Union will get in touch. I think that's all from me. Thanks so much again for coming. Have a very great afternoon.